أجمعين. Firstly, Jazakallah khair and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you, both our Dr. Saab here, Maulana Arif, and the rest of the congregation who unfortunately I cannot see. The pandemic has, for good or bad, reduced us to this online session, but Alhamdulillah, I mean, the online session has opened up a lot of facilities as well. So, may you be having, inshallah, a blessed weekend and a blessed Sunday. And this topic is vast, it's multifaceted, it has so many variables that it's so difficult to discuss this topic and kind of summarize it in a nutshell within a few minutes. That's why I think the bulk of this program will be question and answers, which I actually prefer because that's when we get to really answer people's questions and real serious. Sometimes it's a monologue. If I come in and I'm just giving you 1 hour of a lecture, it may be just completely irrelevant to most of you, right? So that's why what there's just one thing I want to mention. I mean, I published a book, and I'm not here to to plug my book, but um, just saying that the material I'm going to share with you right now is not in the book. That's what I wanted to tell you. If you are aware of the book, Handbook of a Healthy Muslim Marriage, so this is something that dawned on me after writing the book. Somebody, when what we do is when we are about to publish our book and we've got it all ready and it's about to go to press, what we do is we send it out to 15 or 20, as many as possible, critical readers, right, to give us a feedback as though they're reading this off the press, to give us honest feedback. And that way, what happens is that you get a good feedback before you actually go to press so that you can make any changes. So there's one particular reader who said that you've not really covered much on premarital counseling. And I was like, the Muslims, the Muslim community is struggling in terms of in marriage counseling. And you're talking about pre-marriage counseling. But you know, the more I think about it's the more I think about it, pre-marital counseling is actually very, very important for certain people, especially if they need it. What do I mean by premarital counseling? Now, I'm not saying you actually even need to go to somebody for this. I'm going to give you a way to do this for free. Okay? I'm going to give you a way to do this for free. So I'm going to throw out a few things to you. What we need to understand is that when we're getting into a marriage, we talk about preparation of marriage. Now, preparation, let me just close this window to get better sound. Right. Preparation of marriage for a lot of people is you pick someone, you pick the right person, and then after that, if your marriage is organized, let's just say to be in September or August, all the next weeks, they actually become shopping weeks. And it just this huge, long, lengthy time of preparation for the day. A lot of people, what they're doing is they're actually preparing for the day or the 2 or 3 days. Their whole focus of preparation for marriage, once they found somebody, is all about that day or the next day, the walima day, and then it's the honeymoon. The real life is actually supposed to start after that. The honeymoon is a very interesting time, mashallah. But after that is when the real grit, the real, you know, when the going gets tough, when you actually start working with one another. How can you prepare yourself for that? Okay? I'm not trying to exclude the people who are already married, because to be honest, what I'm going to speak about right now, in terms of how you prepare for that, will actually be absolutely relevant for those who are already in the marriage and suffering the same issues. So firstly, I think what we need to do is we need to be honest with ourselves and decide what is it that puts other people off me right now. What is it that other people critique me for right now, criticize me for right now? Now, obviously, when people criticize us, there could be some exaggeration in that. Minus the exaggeration, decrease it 60% if you want. And then, so I'll give you a few examples. Do we have an anger problem? Now, you're going to say, how do I know that? We probably, a lot of people, they do recognize they have an anger problem, but some people don't. The easy way to tell that is among your own brothers and sisters, your siblings, or among your group of friends, are you the one who gets generally very angry? If you do, then we better sort that out before we get married. Because if we don't, then that same thing is going to manifest itself. So it's about being honest with ourselves. And mashallah, today there are numerous ways of dealing with the anger issue. You can, I personally, I think I had an anger issue. I dealt with it by when I read a lot of spiritual works by the likes of Imam Ghazali and others, the Quranic verses about it, the Prophet ﷺ suggestions of how to deal with it and don't get angry and talking about how bad anger is and all the rest of it. I think I've calmed down quite a bit, alhamdulillah, and I think that's improved my marriage. Otherwise, there's a lot of people out there who are in marriages and they know that their anger is having a problem in their marriage. Okay, I'm going to throw out a few other issues just to teach us how to think about this. Number two, are you an emotional person? So emotional that you get sensitive about small things and then you stop talking to the other person? If you do, you're probably going to have difficulty in your marriage. There's a person I know who got married to her husband, knowing that her husband had two disabled siblings and no father, just a mother. She was willing to marry into that family and she felt, I'll be of service to them. I have no problem with that. She got married. Turns out the mother-in-law then started giving her this. Anytime some small issue would happen, she would stop talking to her for 1 or 2 days. Now, if there's just one person in the house or two people in the house, and you don't speak to one another, you don't literally deal with it, it's going to be a problem. So alhamdulillah, the husband was decent enough. He found another house close by, moved his family there, still looked after his mother, and now the relationship between the wife and everybody is completely fine. So if you are a sensitive individual, you stop talking to people and you're going to have to learn to deal with that. Otherwise, it's going to really cause a problem in your marriage, because that's not the way to deal with things. One day, in fact, my kid, who was only about 7 or 8 at the time, right, he comes home and says, I'm not speaking to, his friend, whoever it was. I said, what happened? Why aren't you speaking to him? He said, oh, he did this. I go, where did you learn? I said, where did you learn to say, I'm not speaking to someone? We don't do that at home. We never say that to anybody at home. Where did you learn it from? What a bad way to deal with it. Why don't you just go and deal with it? Deal with the matter. Alhamdulillah, since they, and explained a few other things. And he said, that's not the way to deal with it. The way to deal with such things is to deal with the issue rather than, just reduce yourself and go back in a cocoon and so on. Likewise, look, I mean, I only want to take a few minutes. A lot of other issues, like, are you stingy? Like, how are you going to find out if you're stingy? Well, find out. Think of your brothers and sisters or your group of friends. Are you one, for example, I mean, I'm going to give a really extreme example. Are you one who goes out with his friends to eat? When it comes time to pay, you go to wash your hands, you go to the bathroom, or the restroom, as you call it, so that you don't have to pay. Now, that's extreme, but you understand what I'm saying. Are you stingy? Because if you are, your marriage isn't going to last, especially if you're the guy. Because the men are the spenders. They should be the spenders at least. To get your women to work and to force them to spend is really, really unmanned, really bad. Okay. Are you really into your family? Okay. Are you really into your family in such a way that you're always going to be there, or going back home, and you're going to neglect this new home, right? For girls, that's an issue sometimes, right? Or you're really into your I don't know, soccer. What were you guys into then? The basketball or something? Or you're really into your computer, your iPad, or your social media, that you're going to spend hours and hours on that? All of these, or your friends, that you're going to be constantly having to go out with them, your life is going to change. Now, as I said, to end this, while I'm speaking about pre-marriage, those who are married and have these issues, if they're honest with themselves, know that this is spoiling their marriage. But it's not too late. If we're honest with ourselves and we get help to deal with these issues, you can get anger management classes. There are many good books, many good lectures, many good self-help tutorials and manuals online to deal with things like stinginess and addiction to certain things. I mean, I'm just giving examples that you have to be honest with yourself. If you are unnaturally, overly into something, it's gonna have to be tempered by this new relationship, which you're gonna have to give a huge amount of investment to get it right, to get it going. There's gonna be lot of that. And if you haven't done that already, if you are married, then you definitely your your marriage deserves it. Otherwise, you're going to bring children in the world in an unbalanced environment. That is why one of the biggest causes for rage and troubled people, psychologically troubled people, is they've not had the right kind of upbringing from both their fathers and their mothers. And if we're bringing children into that issue, so I'm going to stop here. That's just to start us off, inshallah. Inshallah, it's relevant, and yeah, we'll carry on, inshallah. Back to you guys.
Jazakallah khair, Imam. That's extremely helpful to start the conversation. Um, and I was going to say, having practiced medicine for nearly 40 years, I understood the idea of prevention from the beginning and the benefit that it gives people. And
Mm.
so it wasn't difficult for me to inculcate this idea into the organizations. Say, we don't ask somebody to come and fix our toilet without having them being licensed and we check their qualifications. How are we entering our children into marriages and they have no idea what they should be doing when they get there? Um, they're training for a career, they're becoming doctors, they're becoming engineers, they're becoming IT specialists. But have they had any training to become a husband, a father, a son that is still the son after he gets married to this woman? The other thing I noticed very interesting that you mentioned was the idea that marriages can go on for 30 and 35 years without having some kind of assessment of the health of the marriage. So I'm going to probe you on both of those, inshallah. So we have several issues that we already know about, things like premarital relationships based on the statistics that have been published from organizations like Family and Youth Institute, which you may be familiar with from Chicago, where they're indicating that premarital relationships, illicit drugs, marijuana, gambling, tobacco, alcohol, and other such social illnesses are very rampant in the Muslim community. So, because it's impossible to discuss all of these, we have to stay to the point. I was going to start off or kick off, as they say, by perhaps asking you, how can we make marriage easy, if you like, project for our children? How does this get promoted by the parent? Just like career is promoted, just like financial well-being is promoted, just like the importance of having it good in the world is promoted. How can we make marriage relevant to the young person by their parents? If you could give us a few points on that. Jazakallah khair.
Bismillah. So I think that that's a big question. I mean, that's a very, very big question. But if I want to summarize that into a few points, I would firstly, I remember giving a talk on marriage about 2 years ago in Scotland, and there was a older, meaning a person is in midlife, I guess, around 35, 40. He said, how can we prepare our children for marriage? And that's such an important realization. How do we prepare our children for marriage? So I think one of the examples that I gave earlier, when my child came home from school and said, um, that he's not speaking to someone, I immediately thought, I think if we can teach good akhlaq, good character, respect for the other, that really helps. Number one. Number two, I think just showing the love and affection and interaction. How parents look, any healthy marriage, even healthy marriages will have some downs. For example, once um, the Prophet ﷺ went to look for Ali radiallahu anhu, to Fatima radiallahu anha's house, and he wasn't there. Where is he? Oh, we had a bit of an issue, so he's in the masjid. This is our best couple. I mean, after the Prophet ﷺ, this is like our supreme couple, and they're having problems in their marriage. The Prophet ﷺ once had an issue with his wives, and he retreated for nearly a month or so into a loft and said, I'm not, to the extent that Umar radiallahu anhu thought that maybe the Prophet divorced his wife because his daughter was married to the Prophet ﷺ. There will be issues. The children need to see how you resolve those issues. How issues will arise, because issues arising is part and parcel of this world. You can't say, I'm not going to have issues. You will have issues. But what you can learn, right? So you can't control too many issues. Some issues you can preempt and you can defend against and you can prepare against. But inevitably something could happen, right? But it's about learning how to deal with those issues. Now, there's a lot of suggestions of how, but I think if you, there's a few things. I think we could create a love bank that really, really helps. So a love bank means, and I've discussed this in my book, that the point is that we do so many good things that are beyond what is the, a lot of people, what they do is they reduce marriage to a set of rights. That is the absolute wrong way to go about it. No marriage, because if I want, I can give you literally the five basic rights in a marriage. And if you're going to try to go by that, you're going to have a really messed up marriage. It's like it's going to be some kind of bare-bone court marriage, just really ridiculous agreement to stay together, right? It's all about love, affection, compromise, becoming one almost. And that's why you need to go out of your way to do a lot. And that has to be constant. You can't, like a man, he says, I'm going to buy some flowers for my wife. So what he does, he's got this one idea that I'm going to buy flowers for. So every Friday after work, he goes and buys the flower from the local store and he brings them home. And every year, sorry, every week is the same old flowers. His wife is going to get tired of that. He's going to like, come on, man. What kind? Uh, uh, a gift has to be a surprise. So yes, if you're buying creatively, thinking about new flowers every week, that's understandable. But if you're buying the same old flowers every week, eventually it's not going to be recognized. Likewise, if on one day you do a lot and then after that you don't do anything for the next month or two, that's not good. It's like, for example, let's give a dental example. You think that it's such a bother, brushing your teeth 5 minutes in the morning. I have no time. I wake up late. I even take my coffee to, in my car or whatever. So on Sunday, I'm going to brush my teeth for half an hour. They're going to say that's actually harmful in that case, right? So it's better to do constant goodness to one another, but that has to come from selflessness. That has to come from not overly engaging in your other addictions or pastimes. This has to become this has to become your priority in the beginning. Then after that, you will recognize one another. Each, once you develop the relationship, the husband will have his, he'll know how much he can follow his own hobbies. The wife will know how much she can follow her hobbies, and eventually they'll come to a very comfortable balance. But initially, you have to put a lot of effort in there. I don't know if I've answered the question. Hopefully, it's one side of the question at least answered. But
Mufti, sorry to interject. I hope my mic's okay. Is it still very distracting? I got a couple of comments that my mic.
no, go ahead, go ahead. I can that.
Okay, inshallah. So, mashallah, jazakallah for the beautiful advice and for Dr. Saab asking the question as well. I think in today's session, Mufti Saab, what we want to focus on is before marriage. I mean, our children, many of them are coming of the age. And first of all, we want to ask, if you see the poster, that what age is an appropriate age nowadays? As you know, back in different eras, and when we were younger, we got married earlier. Now, because of education, because of finances, the children now, they're getting to be married later and later, and sometimes there's pressure on them from the parents. How involved should we be as parents to encourage our children to get married? How supportive should we be for them? What is the right age, can you say? Is it, case to case?
That
uh,
there's there's
yeah.
no right age. That meaning there's no perfect age in the West. The West is just such a variable, right?
Mhm.
What kind of family you're from. If you're from this ultra hyper, what do you call it, focused family on career and everything like that, you probably wouldn't even be allowed to get married sooner, right? And then even after you get married, they have to find you the designer husband. It's just really weird. I would say that the soonest that you can, with mutual agreement from all parents, is the best age. I mean, it's a very difficult one. The Prophet ﷺ got married to at least one of his wives, which is Aisha, at the age of, well, they came together at the age of 9. I would never let my daughter get married at that age, not because I disagree with the Prophet ﷺ doing that, but because girls are different today. Boys are different today. At the age of 9, I mean, at the age of 17, 18, they're still not out of, being on, being hooked to some weird Instagram or Snapchat or whatever,
Mhm.
right? Or the guys, they're just into their Fortnite even at that age, they're not responsible yet. So I think parents need to first teach responsibility, teach the men to be responsible in terms of getting an earning, cleaning, and all of that as well. The women need to also be taught the cooking and all of that kind of stuff. So I would probably say that if we were to give a number, I would say for girls, I would love to have got them married between 20 to 23, at least, I think. And the guys, maybe push another 2 years.
Mhm.
maximum 3 years. Because you know what's going on? I'll tell you what it is. While because of career and everything, before there were no careers, you worked in a field, you were a housewife. There was nothing else to do. You had nothing else to do at night or in the evening. You just ate and did the local work and everything. So it was, you'd rather get married sooner. But now people have put all of this in. But the problem is that we're living in a hyper-sexualized society. Hormones are raging, right? And some parents who are immigrants, they just don't get that. That's why they delay their children getting married. They come from a different place, like in India, Pakistan, Egypt, or whatever, which was a purer time that they came from. But believe me, right now, I mean, what the Chicago and other studies have shown that 80% or so have tested some kind of haram before before marriage, even if they get married. It's crazy out there. There's a lot of frustrating people that contact us. They want to get married, but their parents don't let them get married. So I think the parents should not set unnatural, if your child wants to get married and you can teach them responsibly, you should let them get married. But again, that's just so much variable. I would generally do it as a case, but I would say between the ages of 20 to about 25 would be a good idea.
Mhm.
Somewhere in
So that's one thing that, and also from the lens of the youth themselves, and what kind of relationship should they have with their parents, so that they can open up to them and say, "Mom, Dad, like we're
I
ready to
don't
get
think you
married."
can tell the youth that. I don't tell you you can tell the youth that you have to have that relationship. That's the parents have to have that relationship. The
Mhm.
parents that should be able to create that in the home. You can't blame the children on this one. We can, right? Some children are, but I think that if you see in my home, for example, the children can come home at any age and they can talk about gender fluidity. They can talk about homosexuality, right? If not to both parents, at least one parent. Okay, because we have that kind of openness. We're a very strict family, but we still have that openness that they can discuss it. The way to, I think, check this out is, does your child, if your child likes to be out with his friends more than he likes to be with you, he or she, or number two, your child likes to be in their room on their screen or whatever with their friends, then they would rather be sitting with you, then you've got a problem. Then
Mhm.
you've got a concern. You've got an issue. If your children don't enjoy being with you, they minimize being with the parents, minimize,
Mhm.
then that's an issue. Okay, and parents have to take the blame for this. They have to create that openness. They have to know what's going on in school. They have to be. I mean, that's a whole big discussion about how to bring up your children.
All right, that is a different issue. Yes, yes,
Because
yes.
if your children don't feel comfortable about opening up, there's some families, when the girls get menstruation, right? Which is it's a reality. The wife's having it, the daughter once she becomes 30, and even in religious families, they can't pray, and the brothers are praying. They're going to wonder, why isn't their sister praying? We were all together from Asr to Maghrib. It's Maghrib time. We're praying, but the mother is not praying. What do they tell them? They say, "Oh, she's sick." What kind of sickness allows you not to pray? Right?
Mhm.
Be upfront. Say, this is what we tell our children. Oh, when a woman gets of a certain age, then Allah tells her not to pray for certain days of the week because she bleeds. End of story. You don't have to go into any kind of gruesome detail, any kind of great detail, but be open about stuff, especially natural things. I don't mean like talk about sexual, discussions and all that openly, but
Right, right.
there needs to be some kind of formal, decent discussion that should be allowed.
And sorry, Dr. Sab,
I was going to say, Sheikh, that's a very relevant issue, what you just pointed out. We have in Ontario in particular, there is a emphasis on sexual education of young children. And I really mean young children starting from 6 and 7, going on to 11 and 12. Many parents, unfortunately, either have decided to have the ostrich attitude, where they completely ignore what is obvious, or they just consider that they don't want themselves to be in any way related to this, and so they check their kids out. And so because I have a civic activism interest, and I
Yeah.
teach children, alhamdulillah, masajid, I've had this attitude that if parents, as you quite rightly pointed out, communication is a very big part of all of this. What I'm hearing from what you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that communication has not been established at a level, but there is a comfort of transmitting information. I always revise with people the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's statement to his dad, where he comes in and tells his dad, "Ya Abati, I have seen, oh my dear dad, I have been 11 stars and a moon and a sun prostrating to me." And I always think to myself, how confident is this kid of speaking to his dad about something that sounds so weird? But there must have been excellent communication between the two for him to be able to relate like that to his father. And I'm not a scholar, and this is just my nafis, my
No, no, that's really appreciative. Yeah.
very meager understanding that openness of communication will really result in very much improved. As you quite rightly said, we don't necessarily have to agree with everything they're saying, but we have made this channel open for them, where if my son is interested in a girl, he's able to tell dad, that girl is cute, and I don't lose it. Here, what we have, unfortunately, is people exploding to say, is this how we expect you to be as a Muslim? And we've never really communicated with them to tell them what we expect of them. So please comment on that expectation part. I really like what you were saying there. The expectations of the children being made clear, and I think I said this in the beginning. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but the emphasis being on the career as a husband, as a wife, as a mother and father, being just as relevant as it is to become a physician or an engineer or whatever it is the parents want their kids to do. If you could perhaps say a few words on that topic, please.
So, well, there's actually, as you were speaking, I mean, there was like five different ideas that came into mind of where the fault lines lie. And I'm conscious of the time. That's why I'm trying to summarize as much as possible. But so, number one, I think if the parents, in the West, and I've seen this, I've lived in America for 8 years, I've traveled to Canada a number of times, and I live in England. So what I've seen is that in the West in general, there's this huge focus on career, right? Both the parents as well. I mean, just they sometimes don't have much time beyond their career to even focus on their children, and so on. And that's, I think, worse in the North American area than it is in England. In England, it's still a bit more traditional. So I think that has to be balanced out. Number two, the parents have to be on the same wavelength. Mother and father have to be on the same wavelength. If the father is too restrictive and the mother is too permissive, or the other way around, it's going to create an imbalance. Children know how to play one over the other, right? So that's number two. Number three, at least one of the parents needs to be open to be able to. I mean, it might be asking for too much to both the parents to be so open that they can discuss everything. At least one of the parents, if both, wonderful. Number four, you need to be involved in terms of who their friends are and who who they're communicating with. I'm not saying you need to go and spy every day or whatever, but you need to really understand, be in tune with your child and their psychology. If there's something changing, they seem to be a bit more recluse. They seem to be a bit more angry or anxious. Know that there's something going on in their life. You should be able to pick up those signs, like, okay, what's going on, right? What's going on? And if you've reacted, if your child comes and tells you that they like a certain girl or whatever, now that doesn't mean you must shout at it. You listening to them doesn't mean that you must agree that yes, you can go and have her as a girlfriend. That it doesn't mean that. It's just you must now process it, try to show them the right way to deal with this, their emotions. I mean, so many times your child will come with something, and that this is just the way. You've been through maybe the same thing. So it's about trying to make them understand. Of course, sometimes you may be angry, you may even shout. That's understandable. But more times than none, more times than less, you need to be able to give them some kind of input that they will value. They may not like it, but they should value it at least. When they think about it. I don't know if I've done justice to this. It's a big topic, right?
One sister who's asking a question, and I think that's one of the points that we wanted to discuss today. And she's asking, what advice do you have for a young woman who wants to get married, but her parents are just unable to find suitors because they don't know who to ask or how to begin the search? So that's one of the questions I also had in mind, that, back in the days, traditionally, we had friends and family, and, or we had an auntie who would find a suitable person for you. Nowadays, we have a lot of websites, shadi.com and so on and so forth. I know in our community there's some sisters who have made their own websites or send out, their WhatsApp links, etc. That put your information in, and that's how you get hooked up. So, how to look, where to look, and also, so if you can just a little bit elaborate on that.
Yeah,
Uh,
again, that's a very difficult question to answer because there's no one way to do it, right? You find a suitor, a husband, a wife using any halal source. That's what I would say. Using any halal source. Now, you've listed quite a few of them. You know,
mhm,
we don't have those aunties anymore. We actually do have those aunties. They'd be more than willing to, but they're scared because what some people have done is that if something's gone wrong, they've blamed them for it. So what we need to do is we need to find those kind of aunties or uncles in the masjid or the imams or whatever and say, look, I would like you to help me. I've got a daughter or a son or whatever, and you will not be blamed. You just have to, I guarantee I'll write it for you if you want to, like, give him assurance that you will not be blamed if something goes wrong. Okay? Because the responsibility is on the parents to check them out anyway at the end of the day. They're just suggesting a possible. And you know what? You know these online systems, these sites and
mhm,
apps,
mhm,
they've become the auntie and they're charging you for it. At the end of the day, what they're doing is they're using algorithms to match you up with somebody. Those
mhm,
algorithms is what those aunties were doing anyway, but for free, right? But because there's a blame culture that's come up, right? And there's also, you see, another thing we're dealing with individualism. Our social cohesion is broken down. Our social accountability, responsibility is not there anymore. We don't like. I've seen cases where a person doesn't even know who their neighbors are, right? So because of that, individualism, this whole concept of privacy. I mean, in this case, we insisting on privacy, but yet our privacy has been eroded big time through social media. That's okay. You put your life online, but you don't want anybody to know about what's going on. Otherwise, that can actually be helpful to you. So those aunties do still exist, and I'm sure you can find them. I get, I'm not a marriage maker or whatever you call them, but I do get cases where somebody will come up to me and say, "Look, I've got a daughter, and this is the issue." Sometimes I will actually challenge them that why can't you find anybody? There's one person who called me, for example, and says, I've got 4 or 5 daughters. My eldest one is about 29, 30 now. She can't get married. I said, I can't, and he comes from a community that is full of Muslims, one of the northern towns, right? And I said, I can't believe that you can't find anybody decent. That doesn't make any sense to me. Living in that kind of, you're not living in some kind of outside, suburb where there's nobody, no Muslims. I said, let me talk to your daughter. So I spoke to her, and then it came out what was the issue. Initially, she had been kind of put off the whole Asian culture, right? So she was actually looking for a convert, and there were very few converts. I mean, you're really decreasing your pool. It's wonderful to get married to a convert, but it's really decreasing your pool if that's all what you're looking for. All right. So um, then after that, when she realized that that's not going to happen, so now she's opening up a bit more. So sometimes there's some people who they can't find something because they have very unreasonable expectations. Their criteria is too restrictive. So what I've discussed in my book is that write down two sets of criteria. The first are the non-negotiables. They're the absolutes. You have to find somebody like that, right? Then you have the bonus points. When you start looking, you will start really understanding what it entails. I mean, I was recently looking for a car, and I had a certain criteria, but when I actually started looking with my budget, I had to start chopping and adjusting my criteria. It's the same kind of thing, because remember, the more you delay, the older you get. Psychologically, you will become less risk averse after the age of 27, 28. According to brain studies, you become less risk averse. Number two, you become a lot more understanding of human behavior and how people are, so you become more particular. And number three, the pool of people get less. So you're against time. And then especially for women, there's like an expiry time almost, in some cultures that after that, you know. So don't wait too long. A broader, what do you call it, criteria. And then tawakkal ala Allah. Lots of dua. In marriage, I found one of the most effective things after the practical aspects is dua. Because you may think this person is perfect. You may have even dated that person. But when actually you start getting married, when you actually get married, it turns out to be something else. Allah is the joiners of the heart. You want to do everything halal as far as possible and do a lot of dua while you take your practical measures in place. I'm not saying don't, you have to be practical about this. You know, you have to do your due diligence and everything else like that. I don't mean dating at all, but I mean due diligence. And and then go for it, Bismillah, and then make the investment in it.
Right. Mufti Sahib, so you just touched upon a point there, which I would like to ask, and that is if you have, the, the sisters, brothers, they're studying, they're in college, university, and now they're involved with a girl or a guy, and what advice, obviously, from the Imam, as a Imam,
Okay,
really,
the advice I would give them is this. I mean, that happens all the time. Unfortunately, it's happening quite frequently.
yeah,
The parents aren't finding the right person, then or they are trying to find the right person, but then they just hook up with somebody at university. You know, if they're a decent person, then bring them to your parents. Like discuss it with your parents. And parents nowadays should be open.
they need to be open. How open should it be? Like,
Well, as long as they're
there's
decent.
always clashes with, the mother and father will say, no way, you're not bringing him into my house or her into my house.
Well, look, you know what?
When that clash occurs, what guidance can you give? Like,
Okay, so that's a different issue. If you really want to get married to somebody who you think is decent and everything, and your parents are just not having it, then you're at a crossroad, right?
mhm,
This is what we tell people. I've got a lecture about this on zamzamacademy.com, for more details. But this is what I tell them. I said, look, it depends on what you want. I have to say, your family is very important because at the end of the day, this guy, especially happens with girls, right? The guys they generally survive, but it's girls who get really messed up in this, right? If they take the other path. How important is your family to you? Remember, this guy who's think is the best thing out there, after sliced bread or whatever it is, he may be, but if he dumps you tomorrow, where are you gonna go?
right,
If right, so that's thing. There's a lot of variables you have to think about, right? Look at all the pros and cons of each situation. So, are you really willing to do that? I generally tell people, look, giving first I suss out to them what do they want to do. If they want to just go, they don't care about their parents. Okay, well, stop doing zina. At least get married and go for it,
mm,
right? I would say at least do the nikah and go for it. Okay, I definitely don't advise it, but at least do the nikah so it's halal at least, right? Maybe whatever the case is. Then I hope for the best for them. But most people don't want to do that. They want magic to occur, a miracle to occur that their parents get very happy and they get the right person. But
mm,
miracles happen maybe one in a million, I think, or something. I don't know what the statistic is of a miracle, but it does. The miracles don't happen. So I said, look, be a realist. Like, think about this. Don't be just an idealist, right? Think about this in a real sense. So what I say is, look, give yourself 2 months, 3 months, I don't know, whatever. And then in that time, you're going to make heavy dua to Allah with tahajjud. You're going to convince your parents. You're going to be super nice to them. You're going to, hopefully win them over. And if it works, alhamdulillah, and you got your miracle. If it doesn't happen, then move on because you're wasting your time.
mhm.
Right? There's not really any other way to, I think. That's the three options you have.
Jazakallah khair, Imam. That's extremely helpful. I was going to say we probably need you back on this show again. I don't see us wrapping this up. There's so many questions we're receiving. We have our own questions. You were saying something again very relevant to say. This sounds like a lot of mixed up expectations from the parents and the kids. Uh, I find I don't know what the situation is in England or the United Kingdom, but there is very few religious institutions which are having some kind of premarital courses, which are preparing people for this difficult journey. Part of this, I believe, is the investment has been in the bricks and mortar and not in the human capacity that would increase our youngsters' ability to deal with what's in front of them. They're getting messages from YouTube, they're getting messages from non Muslim friends, they're getting messages from all sorts, but they're not really getting messages from our scholars, from our renowned people who have experience with this. What is your thoughts on having some kind of regular interaction within the masajid? Because I can't think of anywhere else where I would send my children to say,
Yeah.
please learn Please learn
Dr.
this important thing.
Jazakallah for that. I have a campaign. It's an unofficial campaign. It's not become formalized or anything. Is that everywhere I've gone to speak about this, I've said that the masjid, Islamic organizations should stop doing nikah, should stop allowing marriages to happen there until the couple can actually prove that they've taken a course or read a book on marriage. That's the minimum. And I think they do this in Malaysia. You can't get a marriage permit until you have taken a course on marriage. Now, for this to work, you need lots of courses on marriage, right? And you need lots of literature on marriage. Like right now from Trinidad, I've had a father who's called me and he says, "Daughter's getting married. I would like you to set up a regime, a regimen for them as to what they need to do before they're marrying." So I've suggested to them to read a book. So they're reading the book. Then I've suggested to them read a number of lectures. Listen to a number of lectures on it. They've done that. They're doing that rather. And next week I've organized with them to have meetings with each of them, right, about any other questions that they have, right? Now, obviously, I can't do this for everybody. Lots of other ulama and other people have to step in with this. But when the marriage season is about to begin, and the marriage season has begun, I think, because of COVID, it's all got messed up. But generally, the marriage season is May, June, July, August, September. So in April, you need to do a marriage course. Quite a few in many, many masajid. And the masjid should say, if you want to get married this year, you better take this marriage course. Then we should have some marriage courses on demand, right? Which, if somebody misses the live one, they can. And alhamdulillah, on Zamzam Academy, we've got at least, I don't know, 10, 15 lectures on marriage on different aspects of it, right? So, we're providing the resource, but it's not formalized yet, right? That needs to be a necessity, right? If you guys are a masjid, you should implement that straight away.
I was going to say, Imam, I'm going to allow Imam Arif to come in right after this. Our organization, Happy Strong Family, which is an educational social organization, which is non-profit. We don't have a whole bunch of funds, but we've really very quickly realized this has to be done and has to be done quickly with or without the masajid support, because I find the disasters that are occurring are just way, way too serious. So we see talaqs, I'm sure you do. We see people that got married last year coming to the masjid. Dr. Saab is not working, Sheikh Saab is not working, I was expecting this actually happened, she was this, she was that, he was this, it's just painful, it's beyond painful. It's actually something that literally puts off young people from getting married. I've heard from so many young people who said, the reason I'm not getting married is because my sister got married and she got nothing but pain. And when you look into the background, you realize there was no preparation at all. There was literally zippo preparation. It was all done, like you said, the wedding day was emphasized, but the marriage was not. So perhaps in these last few minutes, if we can get you to give us some, it's difficult, I don't want to put you on the spot, but perhaps if you were going to give 3 points to people who are thinking of get married, just if you could make a, if you like, a gist of it, so we can, again, attention spans are short. I'm very happy to see your book. Imam Arif Saab pointed that book out to me before we started the program. I'm definitely going to look into and invest into it. But Sheikh Abdur Rahman, the other problem we have is people don't read no more. They just don't have the aptitude for reading, and even lesser aptitude to pay attention to what it is. I'm not dissing people, but I'm seeing the general effect of social media and videos and all the other things that are distracting people. People. So just to make this something so that people take home, what 3 points can you give us to say these are the 3 things you should do if you do nothing else?
Yeah, I think number one is to repeat what I said earlier, is to be honest with yourself and see what problems you think you have. Honestly, that is going to impact somebody else, and then try to sort that out before you get married. Ask your closest friends to be honest and critique you. Like, tell me, what do you think I'm going to be challenged by, especially if they're married. So get that kind of feedback. So that's the first thing. Number two, go and listen to a bunch of lectures, as many as you can, right? On marriage, there's a lot these days, mashallah. Lots of scholars have put them up. Again, you can come to Zamzam Academy, there's quite a few there. Number three, read a book. And then number four, if you've got any questions, formulate questions if you can. Like, formulate questions and then go and ask them to 2, 3 people who are already married and gauge their response. They don't have to be scholars. Just look at happily married couples and ask them the questions, right? A cousin of mine just got married recently, all right? And he, because of the lockdown, they had different parts of the family coming in every day for a invitation reception. So he had all sorts of ideas. One uncle told him that uh, when you get married, you need, to set up a routine. Even if you don't want tea, like insist she makes tea at a certain time, just to get her into a routine. Then he spoke to me. I said, look, you don't have to be like that. That's coming from another time and place, right? So you're gonna listen to different things. You have to be able to sift through it, but find some decent people who are married and happily married and ask them questions. Who you can trust as well. There's so much resource out there if you want it. To be honest, I wish, inshallah, people will improve their marriages, inshallah, because of this hour that we've spent here. And really, jazakallah khair for this.
Before you go, Imam Sahib, I'm sorry, Imam, I'm going to ask you to commit to another session. I know I'm being cheeky, but I'd like you to commit to another session with us because I can't see this resolving without input from people like yourself, inshallah. So I'm going to let Imam Arif come in.
Inshallah, Jazakallah Mufti Sahib. Before you go, I know we have just a few minutes left. One other point that we had on our poster today, which I'd like you to sort of just touch upon, inshallah, is the compatibility part. When we're looking for a spouse, and especially we have nowadays the youngsters, they go out and they have somebody, the interreligious marriages from Ahlul Kitab. And now we know that from the Quran and Sunnah, we say for the boys, if they get Ahlul Kitab women, but people are now justifying the opposite, the other way around as well, for the Muslim girls to get boys from Ahlul Kitab as well. And obviously, we know if you can just elaborate and discuss that a little bit. And what does it mean by compatibility? If they do come with a convert, they say, okay, they're ready to convert. So, how would we go about that if there are youngsters who do want to get married to a convert?
That's a much when you talk about compatibility from the kind of more deeper, nuanced juridical perspective, it's that would take a much longer time. So what I'm gonna just say in general is that living in the West, I think okay, it's only been 2 or 3 generations, so that's why there's a lot of parents who are obviously holding on to that their children should not marry into another culture, and I completely understand that. I'm not against that at all, right? I can understand where the persistence of some parents is that they should only marry into their own culture. I can understand that, but it shouldn't suffocate somebody, right? It shouldn't suffocate somebody. There's a value. Culture has a huge value, and I don't think anybody can. There's a lot of people say we're not cultural. You are cultural, but all you've done is you've just replaced your maybe Pakistani culture for maybe a specific Toronto culture or a specific, I don't know, Canadian culture or whatever the culture is. Culture is part of our life. You can't divorce yourself from culture. You're going to get rid of one aspect of culture, you're going to bring another aspect of culture. There's somebody who said to me, I don't want to get married to somebody who's, from a Muslim background because they come with baggage. So I want to get married to a convert. I said, converts also come with baggage, but it's just different baggage. Everybody comes with baggage, all right? So marry a convert, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Compatibility could be with a convert, sometimes even maybe better. It just depends on the individual. Because as we're in the West and as our generations continue here, it's all going to become one. There's going to be a new culture. It's not there yet. The lines are still there. There's still Indians and Pakistanis, and even within Pakistanis, there's subdivisions still that are understood. They are dying out. Somalis, what do you call it? Vietnamese or whatever. But eventually, we're all going to become a pizza, pasta, eating, Tim Hortons, drinking, community, right? I miss Tim Hortons, to be honest. So what I'm saying is that eventually, give it another 2 or 3 generations, and I think a lot of this, ya Allah, you're really rubbing it. Right? So in 2 or 3 generations, a lot of these questions will go away. But right now, compatibility is important, that the parents and children mutually. The best situation is where the parents and children mutually decide on the best match. That's the only simple thing I can say. Maybe it's very difficult to get to that if one of the two parties are stubborn, either the parents are too stubborn, children are too persistent. So then there has to be a bit of give and take.
Right. Mufti Sahib, we have to go. One final question before I hand it over to Dr. One of our viewers is asking, and if you can just quickly answer that. Salam, why don't you guys talk about the virtues of marrying a widow? So,
MashaAllah. You don't want me to start on that subject because one of the biggest things we're dealing with today is I know in my local community at least 5 or 6 women who are in a depressed, suffering clinical depression or whatever it is after being divorced. Some communities are brutal against divorcees. They don't let them get married again. There's a stigma attached to them. So people need to get married to divorcees, right? To widows and widows, of course. I mean, not just divorcees, but widows. I'm not sure if they mean just widows like somebody whose husband has died, right? But there's another solution there as well, which is a very controversial solution, which I don't want to bring right at the last second here, right? But there's another which I think is gonna eventually have to go. Eventually, is gonna have to come about if you want to really get rid of widows, meaning decrease the amount of widows and decrease the amount of divorcees, then I think there's another solution which a lot of people aren't prepared for yet.
Right.
They've accepted gay marriage,
Mhm.
but anyway, I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, you'll leave it, inshallah. Inshallah, Mufti Sahib, inshallah, if you can make the final dua. And Mufti Sahib, Jazakallah once again. Mufti Sahib is a very, very busy man. He has to get to somewhere. He's in UK, so they're ahead 5 hours. And he has to get to another point by 7 o'clock their time. So Mufti Sahib, inshallah, if you can make a quick short dua, inshallah, and then we can conclude. Jazakallah.
اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم يا أرحم الراحمين يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا معدن الجود والكرم يا خير المسؤولين ويا خير المعطين. Ya Allah, we ask you for your special mercy. Ya Allah, we ask you for your forgiveness. Ya Allah, we ask you for your blessings. Ya Allah, everybody here who's here. Oh Allah, bless them all. Oh Allah, bless them all. Oh Allah, grant them the best of spouses. Oh Allah, grant them the best of spouses. Those who are married, oh Allah, improve their relationships. Oh Allah, grant us the best of children, the best of progenies until the day of judgment. Oh Allah, protect us and our progenies until the day of judgment. Make them ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما. O Allah, O our Lord, grant us from our spouses and our progenies, our children, those that will gladden our sight, and make us the true leaders, make us proper leaders of the guided ones. O Allah, make our children and our families guided people and make us their leaders. And O Allah, allow us to be keys for change and protect us from being keys of evil. O Allah, allow the families to prosper. Allow Islam to continue and to be preserved, especially in the West. Allow us to rise to the challenges and deal with them. O Allah, bless this organization. O Allah, bless the organization. Bless Imam Arif, Dr. Saab here, and all the other people who are involved in any way, shape, or form, who support, who take part, and anybody who will listen to this. O Allah, take it from strength to strength. Allow them to do many, many good things. And O Allah, protect them. O Allah, accept all of us. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillah.